The film board gathers. The gang of thugs has come together to talk about a film currently in theaters, and this week we take on the great Bong Joon Ho's return to sci-fi with his own stamp on multiplicity. It's Mickey 17.
Hi, Mickey. Are you experiencing any vertigo?
I guess I am feeling a little dizzy.
Oh, wow! Did you see that?
Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you're thinking at this point, what have I done?
How lucky can one guy be?
Nothing was working out, and I wanted to get off of Earth.
You're applying to be an expendable?
Yeah.
You read through the whole application.
Ain't that a kick in the head?
I should have read through it.
Once you die, we'll print a new version of your body.
My head keeps spinning.
They made me work my ass off on one mission after another.
Every time you die, we learn something new, and humanity moves forward.
Oh, wait! He's alive. It's fine.
My life is gonna be beautiful.
Mickey, it's not looking very good for you.
Yeah, no.
I'm sure you're used to it by now, but what's it feel like to die?
Even on my 17th go-around, I hate dying.
Why aren't you dead? Multiples.
In the case of multiple.
This month, we're staring down director Bong Joon Ho's follow-up to Parasite with Mickey 17, a film that asks, what if your job literally killed you and you still couldn't quiet quit? We follow an expendable space colonist played by the Robert Pattinson, who die repeatedly on dangerous missions only to be reprinted and reprogrammed with his own memories. Look for it coming soon in your corporate wellness program. Joining me for this existential nightmare are three film fans who, unlike Mickey, cannot be replaced despite what we put them through. Justin Jaeger, Tommy Metz III, and Andy Nelson, our very own Mickeys 8, 12, and 15, join me to explore a film about a man who literally cannot escape his job even through death. Hello, gents.
Hello. Wonderful
Hello.
to have you. And it's so exciting to have Andy Nelson back.
Isn't that weird?
On board.
It's
been a little
weird.
while.
I
When
get to
he
be
jumped
8,
into
right?
the call, there was like a cold wind blew through our microphone.
Well, last time I was here, I think it was Megan, so I'm only coming for the M movies now.
Oh, outstanding. At least I know what the formula is. If it's an M movie, Andy is summoned.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it all has to be someone's name.
Right. This is a fascinating movie because I saw JJ for real in real life yesterday, and we both had a little kibitz about how much we did actually enjoy this movie, and we both said the same thing. Gosh, when we were watching this movie, we sure were thinking about Andy. And I think as we go into one of the things that I've learned that is sacrosanct to the show is our opening thoughts segment. So I'm not going to get rid of opening thoughts, but I am going to ask Andy to go first on his opening thoughts. And I will add to this something that we bring in from Sitting in the Dark, axes to grind. Opening thoughts and axes to grind on this film. Andy, what do you think?
I think it's funny that I was in both of your thoughts. It's like you're both Timo and I'm the Mickey, and you're both trying to figure out how can we best exploit him.
Yes.
What does it feel like to die?
Yeah, right. It's a frustrating film for me because I generally enjoy
Just starting with the axe. Just going with the axe right away.
It's opening thoughts too.
Yes.
But it's frustrating. It's like I enjoy Bong Joon Ho when he's telling films that are done with, I don't want to say just like a more serious tone, but there's something about when he has a much more comedic style in his films that I really struggle with his comedy stylings. And so this was a hard one for me. There's a lot of really interesting ideas in the film, but on the whole, I just had a hard time getting through this film. It was just a rough watch. And it didn't help that I was in an audience that largely was completely silent through it, like nary a laugh.
No.
It was not and it was like I'd say maybe third full auditorium. And so it was pretty quiet. And so it just, it just didn't make for a great watching experience.
Okay, well, that's a huge bummer. And you've really harshed our buzz. So let's see if Tom is going to pile on.
Well, the word that I was going to use, and I'm not kidding because I have it in my notes right here, is frustrating. It is a movie where I like and agree with so many of the ideas. There's a lot of really great parts in it. And I feel bad saying this, I wish it wasn't so much movie. It took on 9 different topics and kind of lowly or shallowly talked about all of them. And I would have really liked to deep dive into 1 or 2. Also, the fact, I don't know when they made this, but the fact of who we have in office as the president makes Mark Ruffalo, who I love, that kind of character, kind of a tough watch right now. It's not fun. It's hard to just sort of poke fun and laugh at it. And one of my biggest things is I like voiceover to be extremely detailed. Well, no, I'm fine with voiceover as long as it's not just sort of meandering. And this film is wall to wall voiceover to the point that it makes me wonder how much of it was added later on, because entire scenes are just voiceovered when you're seeing people have conversations and we can't hear it. So I like a lot of it. I'm glad to have seen it. Overall, I really felt its running time and it just felt way too spread out.
Sort of sharp axes. JJ, rebuttal?
Yeah. Well, I don't think it is a complete rebuttal because I definitely agree with the amount of time there. I think so. I have many questions for all of you, but in particular, Andy, like this thing about, and Pete, actually, the thing that he warned me about or told me about in regards to your feelings about Bong Joon Ho is
I just go around warning people about
in
you.
particular.
Andy, I'm sorry.
And I did actually find this movie very funny. I do think that my theater was more silent than I would like to. Not like me laughing at Marvin getting his head shot off in Pulp Fiction and nobody else in the theater joining me, kind of, but it was closer to that, right? So I get that, but I really would like to hear sort of more on your feelings about that when we get to it, especially because the reason why I thought of you so much is because this movie, the first half of the movie, which I really liked, I really, really enjoyed the first half, the setup and the sort of, and I don't want to call it shorthand, but the quick pace in world building, in explaining the story and the way that they did it, I really enjoyed that. There was a point in the early parts of this movie in the first half where I was like, this is a 5-star movie for me. It definitely started falling off as we continued into things forward. But I was laughing, and those early pieces really made me think of Brazil a lot. And that's why I was thinking of you, Andy. I was like, oh, Andy's really going to like this because it's this dystopian future thing that has the sort of lighthearted thing to it. But I totally want to hear more about your piece there. And Tommy, my question for you would be I would really like to hear the multiple things that you would like to go further on in this movie, because I agree with that. I think it does get a little long in the tooth, for lack of a better word, and the pieces that you are interested in going deep on, I would really like to hear. For me, I super enjoyed those first parts. It took me by surprise a lot in that I thought it was going to be kind of strictly a multiplicity kind of movie, strictly about cloning and duality, and there ended up to be applications of that concept that felt really kind of prime Bong Joon Ho to me, in that, like, thinking of these futuristic things and then translating it to things that may have to do with politics and these, all of these things that I thought was great. The axe to grind for me is a very specific thing about story. So I don't know how much you want me to go here, but the big, like, this is all ultimately in spoiler territory, but the fact that they choose to destroy the printing machine makes absolutely no sense, because the only reason why they could have survived is because of the printing machine. So they chose to vilify the single thing that made it possible for them to survive, which doesn't make any sense. So
it becomes so ideologically focused there.
Well, and this is where we get into these different ideologies, right? Like, and I really love how the story told us the backstory of why multiples are a terrible thing, but they didn't evolve to see how they could also be a positive thing. And that was a really interesting thing for me to consider in the film. So, so I loved the movie and I was surprised by it. And I think one of the interesting things about the political aspect of it is I wonder how we would feel about it, because it was definitely being made before the election. if the election had gone the other way, how would we feel about the statements in this movie? And I just want to put that out there to maybe talk about at some point too. So those are all my first impressions. And I was just really excited to talk to you guys about it because I think your opinions are going to be super awesome.
Definitely some points to discuss.
Good.
Yeah, I hope somebody was taking notes. So I I realized immediately that Andy wasn't going to like this movie, and and it's because Andy didn't like The Host, which is one of my favorite Bong Joon Ho movies. I just love it, and so the fact that this movie sort of reclaims a little bit of that territory. For me, it lands strictly in Armando Iannucci territory. Like, I'm a huge Armando Iannucci fan. I absolutely adore The Death of Stalin. I love Veep. I love just the personal history of David Copperfield, extraordinary. Avenue 5 is the cruise ship in space series he did for HBO, and that's this movie. Like, it has kind of a good premise, but it goes so far into this other territory in the second half that I think it completely loses its thread. So I think it's safe to say this movie was a 5-star film for me for a good half of it, and falls apart in the second half with just straight up predictability. It is like the oldest tale that he could possibly choose to tell, and he told it with the alien roly-polies. And I thought that I just lost interest. I knew so far in advance how far this movie had called its shot and how they were going to make which characters diabolical and the standout. Like, I feel like I could have written it at that point, and I was really frustrated. It's also kind of a Luc Besson movie, right? Like, it is visually stunning, and then it becomes Lucy. And I don't need to relitigate
or
Lucy.
Fifth Element.
Well, okay. I hear you. Heard. What just happened?
Tommy's muted.
Tom
He's
muted
trying
I've
to
been
talk.
talking for a while. I was wondering why no one, when I said in the loop, when you were talking about Armando, and everyone ignored that I said in the loop.
Yeah.
I like what you're saying about, I forgot how much I was enjoying it. And then how crazy I felt at the end when both Mickeys are being surrounded by all of these shrieking CGI blobs. I was like, wait, how did we get here again? Like, I feel crazy because that movie was a lot of fun. And then it decided to be about everything, which was
everything. It really did. And it didn't feel at that point like I was in capable hands. That's my biggest axe, was that this is the second half of the movie practically isn't a Bong Joon Ho movie for me. And the first half, I think, retained much of what I feel like I expected from his previous comedic work, which I genuinely like. I think what I wanted was more Snowpiercer, and I didn't get that. I started to get that, and then I didn't get that at the end, and I was very, very frustrated by that. So let's go down some of those points, JJ. They're really, really good points. We don't need to go. So where do you want to start with? I think you had addressed the first to Andy.
Yeah, let's start there, because honestly, like, that's the comedy thing. Like, I just want to learn more, Andy, from you about like the reason why I thought Brazil immediately is because there were these things that were definitely intense as an audience member to take in a futuristic sort of way, but they were definitely played for laughs. And so I want to hear more about your distinction between your love for a film like Brazil and then this, where it fails you in terms of Bong Joon Ho's version of humor.
And that's a tricky thing to just answer simply, I suppose, because I feel like so much of that also is just how the script is written and how the director is shaping the film. And I think Gilliam and Bong have very different kind of ways that they're approaching stuff.
Sure.
I think that, and I mean, there's definitely a lot of that kind of absurdist comedy throughout Gilliam's films, and Brazil certainly has a lot of it. I think the line is it still feels maybe like there's a serious thread going on, and there are times here where, like, Mark Ruffalo and just so many of the actors are just like so over the top and so like big and bombastic that it's just like it's just so far down this comical direction that I don't feel like there's anything serious to be played there. Like
Sure.
I had a really hard time buying anything that Mark Ruffalo did. It was just it was so big. Same thing with Toni Collette as his wife. Like the two of them I had a hard time with. I think that the comedy, I think for me that works so well in something like Brazil is like comedy in a lot of the moments and things like that. And there were moments that I found genuinely funny in this film. It's more those moments about like the reactions, like when maybe an example is like when another version of him is printing out and they've all completely forgotten to pay attention to the fact that he's printing.
Yeah.
And the woman has to come running over and she's trying to hold up his body as the guy's trying to, or the second time where he just falls to the floor and nobody even notices.
Love it.
Like those are the moments that I think worked better for me in the comedy of just kind of like the absurdity of this society as it's been created and the ways that things are happening in this society because people just don't care. Like they don't care about the fact that this person is an actual person. They're just like, he's an expendable. If he dies, so be it. Like those are the moments that worked better for me in the comedy elements. It's when we get those characters that just are so. And it's a funny thing because I was thinking about this in relation to Snowpiercer. Tilda Swinton was pretty big and over the top in that one too, but there was something about her there that I could buy into a little more. And I'm not exactly sure where that line is, but there's just something about the way that these characters were that I couldn't buy into these characters in the way that they were being portrayed.
Well, and it is a subtle line, but it's an important line, and it's not easy to define. So I like the way that you started the answer in saying that it might not be simple to figure out. I think so for me, in particular, thinking about Mark Ruffalo here, like this movie harkened to me for the movie that was my favorite of last year, which was Poor Things, and it's the kind of thing of like
exactly what I thought of with him.
Yeah. So there's so much here where he's such a cad in Poor Things, and he's strangely diabolical and over the top here too. I loved Poor Things, and I think I could argue based on the criticisms you guys have, which I actually think are really valuable, that like I was really pulling for this movie because I wanted it to be as good as some of these other things, and I felt like that first half really had the opportunity to be that way.
Sure. Yeah, and I agree with that too.
Sure. Tommy, what are some of those concepts that you really wanted them to go deeper on?
The idea of what is individuality. The idea of the fact that he's getting the same brain dump, but that Mickey 17 and Mickey 18 were so different that like explorations of like, if we have all of these different types within us just naturally, how do certain things bubble up and when, how can we really talk about someone being expendable? Where does any kind of value of life matter? I mean, we saw a zillion Mickeys. We saw a lot of Mickeys throughout the movie.
Yeah.
We only got to know two of them. Right. But like during the nerve gas and stuff, those were Mickeys that were dying. And so I would have wanted to spend more time about that. And I like the idea, while the alien stuff got way too encompassing or over wrought for the film, I like the idea that the one guy that everyone thinks is expendable is the only one that is able to contact this alien being that we also now are about to make expendable. That's interesting. I like that. But when you're doing that and then imperialism and colonialism and the rich versus poor, like Pete brought up Snowpiercer, and I love that comparison because Snowpiercer, nope, that's not supposed to be a joke, but really was more of a straight line of like class distinction, class warfare.
Right.
And this one is about 9 things.
Yeah.
All at once. I just wanted more. I wanted more time to spend with the idea of individuality and what does it mean to make a copy of yourself and those kind of things.
Well, like, sure. Tommy, you brought up that point. Sorry, JJ, you brought up that point about that individuality. And one of the things that they talk about with that is that initial person who they actually had multiple versions of him that had killed those other people. And they talked about like the court cases about, well, does one person serve, do each of the 3 serve a third of the sentence? Do they each serve the same sentence? Like that sort of stuff. I'm like,
do
this
they
is
split
really
one person's food.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm like,
fun.
that's the stuff that I found so interesting and like it was exciting. And then
But the
loses
movie kind of
itself.
got bored with that. It was sort of
Yeah.
like, isn't this funny? And I was like, oh no, that's the movie for me.
Right.
Right.
Well,
that
and
was the point.
the moment in the film when I said this is a 5-star movie, again, reflecting on the first half, is when Mickey 17 is chasing up the stairs to follow Nasha and Mickey 18. And I'm like, oh, we're going to get that interaction. We're going to challenge that concept of multiples and how, like, that's really good to me. This is what I want to do. And again, it went crazy in the second end. The thing that I really like that you said too, Tommy, is this concept of identity or this individuality is, I think, what you said. It's clear that Bong Joon Ho or some other people in the filmmaker community with this movie believed that the identity of Mickey Barnes was something to celebrate, which I think potentially the movie isn't actually that story. But when you see the flip from instead of moving to numbers, like all of a sudden he has a name, it's like, oh, but again, this goes to, again, back to my axe to grind. Like, that's not the story here. The story is about like so much more than that, about having an individual identity. There's much more to go deep on than that. And that's why I think it kind of contributes to my axe as well.
I think that's a great point, JJ, that the fact that by the end of the movie, they want me to celebrate something that I didn't know I should be looking forward to. Right. And I think part of that is that we never got to know any of the other Mickeys before 17, 18. And so having this sort of individual identity versus continuity of consciousness argument becomes something that is frail because it makes Mickey 18 the abnormal one, when in fact what we probably would have expected is the first 16 actually had individual consciousnesses too. And then the movie kind of falls apart, right? If you're now only discussing this with Mickey's 1 and 2. And the setup, to Andy's point, like the setup was, it was a bunch of guys who were all in on the murdering gambit, right? They were all a part of it. Right. And I thought that sort of that just fell apart too fast. To the one of the I think you and I lost our 5 stars at the same point. When they finally bring the 3 of them together, the 2 Mickeys and Nasha, it becomes a sex joke and nothing more. Right. I was like, you missed the point. You missed the point.
And we brought in Oxy.
Yeah.
And what was that?
You brought in
Oxy.
Oh, this joke that is, this drug that is shortened to Ox. It's, pick 3 of your 19 lanes.
Yeah, there were an awful lot of lanes. I think one of the higher lanes is potentially corporate utility versus human dignity. But I struggled with corporate utility because this is a church. Does that muddy the story for even the parts of the story that we liked, knowing that there are axes flying all over the place for this movie? Does the fact that we are munging the church and corporate utility muddy the story for you guys?
Isn't it art imitating life? I mean, yes, it does, but that's real,
yeah,
right? That's what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's an apt reflection of what it takes to buy into a movement, whether it happens to be a business or a spirituality or a political leaning. And that's so much of that. It feels muddy because we're being faced with people who are actively messaging that muddy message to us every day right now.
And I love that it's okay.
Yeah. And I love how you brought it up. I hadn't even thought of the aspect of the job that you mentioned in the intro. I think that's such a great thing to talk about how literally dying on the job, like this, there is an aspect of the worker here, which is just another one of the ones that could be listed on Tommy's list of things that they could talk about if they chose to focus on.
Yeah.
But that is a great thing to look at here, is what's the commentary of working here and what you're doing for your job too. I don't know. There's a lot to it, but I think it is muddy. I agree. And that could be a criticism, but it might be on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it came back to something you posed in your opening thoughts, which was, I think, around Ruffalo and talking about the current state of our politics in the United States. But this being the norm, the muddiness of the political state, I mean, every one of the major themes of this movie are quite literally playing out in in real life, right? It is art imitating life, imitating art. Maybe so chapter and verse that's the problem that I may have with the second half of this movie. And it may be the problem that the second half of the movie has with the first half. It's like, oh, we leaned in too hard. Let's talk about the creatures now.
Right.
We're afraid of answering all of these questions because we don't. This is terrible. We've set ourselves up. And word is like there was a lot of futzing with this movie to make a finished movie.
Really?
So I don't know.
Is that
What does that
because
do
I
for
mean I brought that up with the VO.
Yeah.
That the voiceover seems to be plugging leaks or something like that.
Well, I'm guessing none of us have read the original story, right? Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I mean,
No.
but it sounds like that they had other people come on board to help really flesh the whole thing out. So I'm guessing that I'm just curious, like what's in the original story that they expanded upon, because it feels like they went in a lot of different directions to get to this result.
There is, okay, I don't know which lane this is now, but I feel like we've got to talk about the sauce and the act of making a sauce out of the indigenous creatures and offering them up on fingertips for eating.
It's another lane, and I think it just goes into like I was like, I kind of lose track of all the different things that they're potentially speaking to, but the idea of like it goes to like, are we now talking about the plight of the pangolins and the fact that people are driving this animal to extinction because they can grind down their scales and use it for some health cure or something like that. Like we just keep going down these different lanes, and I'm just like, why are we now into this particular story here? I mean, I feel like Bong Joon Ho took every possible thing that he's interested in as far as what he wants to change with the world and shoved it into this movie, because that was exactly where he was going with this one.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially when we get the dinner sequence and we have him actually eating. What was that thing that he was eating?
So gross.
It was a steak. It was like bioengineered steak.
Supposed to be steak. Oh,
Steak plasma, like
raw. Yeah,
it was revolting.
So that is the scene, though. Like aspects of that scene is what reminds me of Brazil, right? Where we get these sort of layers in that, like, he's been invited to this dinner, but really the dinner is just another experiment. And then all of the doctors come in and they're like, oh, let's observe. Oh, this is amazing. Like, that's where really I got into the sort of Brazil aspect of it. But that was disgusting and really hard to deal with, for sure.
But legitimately funny when the doctors are hiding behind a hidden door in the president's dining room. Like, I thought that was... that I laughed at that. Like,
there were a lot of funny moments with that one. The food itself is funny and how disgusting it is. Yeah,
he starts vomiting, and just how they resolve the vomiting, and the chaos of, do we care about the fact that he's vomiting, or should we just shoot him? Like, that gets back to the utility of this character and what purpose he serves, and how complacent everyone around him is because they'll just reprint him.
The rug was more important than he was.
The rug was more important. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
The concept of the sauce reminds me of, again, Yorgos Lanthimos, in that I think about the rabbits in The Favorite, and it feels like this sort of like, it's not behind the scenes, but it's like an undercurrent of what we're thinking about in terms of imperialism and all these things, is like, really, like, how can we use people to feed us or to fuel us in some way. And I shouldn't say people, because she's talking about these beings, but it's like all of that felt like it was something that was just kind of riding beneath what's going on, because she was so obsessed with calories and eating. Like that's the vibe that I got from the concept of the sauce there too.
Well, and so is Bong Joon Ho. He's obsessed with the things we put in our mouths, and it's it's Snowpiercer, it's Okja, it's like, you name it. He's been talking about how we handle food for years.
Right.
Yeah. All I could think about was the that commercial or PSA that Taika Waititi did, where he was like the animated rabbit talking about like the torture that rabbits went through in these perfume factories to to test the putting the stuff in their eyes to see how they reacted and all this stuff. Like that's where my brain went when was anything with the sauce.
Yeah, I think Bong Joon Ho will look at our conversation when Bong Joon Ho looks at our conversation, like tomorrow,
friend of the show,
as a success, as like a wild success of like, oh my gosh, all of these things are now planted seeds in your psyche to consider. So even
point.
though we had trouble or we have these, like, I feel like this as an artist, this is what he is setting out to do. And you could argue that the other films that he's done, not necessarily Snowpiercer, but Parasite and all these are this sort of thing to sort of open up the discourse about all the different things that he wants us to be talking about and thinking about and all this stuff. And yeah, they signify loose ends here, but I think this is his art, for better or for worse.
Even Parasite, right? It is about sort of gluttony versus stolen nutrition, right? There is a whole angle of how food is acquired and used in that film. Fascinating. Things that worked really well. I want to talk about production of the film because for me, I never once questioned the multiple Pattinsons. Never once did I question two Pattinsons on screen at the same time.
At the same time, that was incredibly well done, and I think that's where all the CGI or whatever money went.
Yeah. Well, I think digital stitching, obviously, but they did the old tricks, right? Body doubling, motion control, multiple takes. Like they did all the tricks to do it, and really favored practical when they could. And I think it just plays so very well.
Incredibly well.
Yeah, well, and I think Pattinson in particular did a great job of getting us into that. I mean, his performance was part of that. We're talking about the technological aspects of it, but he did a fantastic job of helping us buy into what he was experiencing as a character.
Yeah, I never doubted that there were two different versions of him, both personality-wise and just on screen in my field of sight. It always felt real, and that was really impressive that they pulled off, and that he just delivered such great kind of subtle nuances in those two versions of himself.
Yeah,
I thought he played both of them so consistently. I personally wish that our main Mickey wasn't such a oh boy kind of a guy. That little of that goes kind of a long way with me, but that's just a personal feeling of like sort of a sad sack. I didn't read all the paper stuff, and I don't know about this. This cake looks weird. I don't know. Like I don't like following around kind of dum-dums, even if they're sweet.
Is it because of all the narration though, or do you think that it would have been the same problem if you
I think the narration is a huge part of it because the voice he picked was so wah, 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 wah kind of a thing that you can't, because then every once in a while when it's not voiceover, he's like super charming and cute. Like you see him as Nasha.
Yeah.
As Nasha sees him, because at first you're like, why would anyone ever pick this goofball? But then he's cute and kind of like messy haired and everything like this. But then his voiceover makes him more like, I don't know, like a Big Lebowski kind of a loser. Yeah. That's not a good comparison at all.
I will say the scene where explaining their relationship, where they go into somewhat of retconning or rewriting for the audience to understand their bond, because you don't, right? The way that they sell it to you early is very superficial, but the scene where I'm going to get emotional even talking about it, but when she climbs into the chamber to sit with him as he dies, it was like so powerful for me. And I want to just highlight, for me, that's in the second half of the movie. So even though we're going crazy at this point, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the human relationship part that this is the story that I want to go deep on, right? Like about identity and about the connection and all this stuff. So I love it.
That would have been great to go deeper on all that, because it's such an interesting aspect to her story. But again, I wanted a little bit more of her backstory. Like, was she initially interested in him because she was kind of fascinated by the idea of him being an expendable? Like, what drew her to him? And like that moment right there is a perfect example of somebody who, like, wants to save Nepal or whatever, right? It's like I've got my my thing that I'm going to champion, and this is it. Like, is that it? But then she falls for him. I don't know. And that's, I guess, my problem with the relationship is because I never, like Tommy, it's just like, it's hard to connect with that character because he is kind of a sad sack dum-dum.
And JJ, I love that part too. And I thought that was, hey, come on, I'm doing my best. That part I also love, JJ, but I remember thinking, why now? Why didn't we have this before?
Right.
I've been told to believe this company and this stunning woman who's all power, and this sad sack weak guy that we're just like over and over again. I don't know, like why it's almost like the movie was like, oh, they're not, but I like to think it was like them making everything is made chronologically. And so they're like making it like, oh, I don't think they're buying the couple, boss. And he's like, oh, okay, let's say earlier she got in the container. I know that's not how movies are made, but it's just like, give us the foundation. Instead, they really, the way that they gave us the bond was purely through, it seemed like sexual contact.
Right.
There was also her sticking up for him, but I mean, they made it a physical bonding.
Yeah.
And I just didn't quite understand it.
What part didn't you understand about the physical bonding? That she would be attracted to Sad Sack Dum Dum?
No, that no,
SSDD.
I wanted more of the emotional connection and the reason that she liked him versus, I mean, they just immediately start their sexcapade. And I was just sort of wondering why.
Well, I do think we should talk a little. Let's make this a film sex podcast just for a segment, because I think that they had already set the table for sex being verboten while on the ship because they're counting calories, and immediately they go into a sexual relationship, which to me felt like a bit of a too tidy a transition to, well, we can't help it. We're human organisms and we copulate. And that's going to be the what we do now to start rebelling against the authoritative hand.
So I understand that perspective, but my take on it is a little bit opposite in this regard, because of exactly what we experienced together, is this, that it's verboten. But my favorite Black Mirror episode of all time is Hang the DJ. And the concept in Hang the DJ is that it is an algorithm that is designed to figure out which pairing is most likely to break the rules. And that is the evidence of true love. And so, like, when I get this in this movie, I'm like, oh, of course, they're told they cannot, but they love each other so greatly that they do it. Now, it's thin. It's a leap that you have to take as an audience member, and it's thin, I will agree. And you could easily have the interpretation that you just mentioned. But for me, especially then, of course, when we retcon with these additional emotional things later on, I'm like, oh, okay, great. And I bought it. So, but again, like I said, I was pulling for it as well. So.
But I guess one other element with that is like, are we supposed to think that they're the only couple that's actually doing this?
Well, I think
because you're right, but we're never shown that. And that's the thing. Like, when that edict comes down that no sex until we have this big sex party day, whatever the thing is, it's like, so I don't know. My assumption was like, everybody's probably secretly having sex. It's like what you're going to do. It's like, the way that humans operate. And so, but we're only ever shown them. And so it just makes it harder to figure out, like, are they doing this just because of that? Or is there, like, you just don't really know,
Yeah. I mean, even the two women, one of them is crushed by ice, the survivor, like, they even were written and blocked and had emotional connection that indicated these two people are in a physical relationship. And they are not counting calories when they do it.
Yes.
And I think that's I think that's, to your point, everybody's doing it, and we get a few hints, but really the only one that we get to see is both of the Mickeys at some point or another doing drugs and having sex and wanting threesomes.
And again, as a apologist for this movie, what a great commentary on the repression of sex in society. But anyway, go ahead. Go ahead. Go wherever you want with your interpretation, but I'm into it.
JJ wants the full 8-hour cut that actually has full stories of all of these things where everything's wrapped up.
Yes. Give me the obsessions. Give me the kinks. I want it all.
Yeah. Okay. There's a guy in a pigeon suit. Sidebar. There's a guy in a pigeon suit. What do we make of the pigeon suit guy? Anything?
All I could say is I have seen him so many times in the trailer for that other movie that's coming out soon, the something island, where it's the two singers who are invited to that island, something Wallace Island. Anyway, I have seen that trailer before so many movies in the last 2 months that as soon as he came up, that was the only thing I could think of. It's like, oh, it's that guy from that movie that I've seen the whole movie in the trailer like 50 times.
That is the Ballad of Wallace Island. I have never even heard of it.
Me either.
Watch the trailer. You'll see him, and you'll go.
They're just showing you the trailer.
Exactly.
No, it might just be.
Beamed directly to
Some
everyone.
algorithm has decided I am the one person who's meant to see
I'm
that
still
movie.
somehow getting the Speak No Evil trailer, even though that movie came and left.
Okay, so we don't have an answer on Pigeon Man.
No,
Anybody? I mean, I'll take the thinnest of reasons to have a pigeon guy.
It's just idiocracy, right? I mean, there's so much of the film that is talking about that, of the ridiculousness of ways to anesthetize fear. And it just really feels like another one of those aspects of what they're trying to do.
And the portrayal of fervent blind followers of a particular politician. Like, that's really where my head went with him.
Oh, yeah. I like that. I like both of those things. I'll take it.
JJ mentioned earlier, I'm thinking of things that JJ brought up. He also brought up the idea of destroying the machine. And I wanted to chat a little bit about that because that was another interesting element that I thought they could have done so much more with, because I actually like the idea of destroying the machine. But the thing is that it speaks to the nature of humans trying to find the easy way to do stuff. And you see it all through, any industry that we have. It's like, hey, it's so much easier if we just dump all of our waste into this river that's right next to us. Let's just do that. And so they'll do the easy thing. And then someone's like, well, we really shouldn't do that. We're killing everything. And, now the rivers are on fire. And they put policies in place that keep us from actually doing the things that are wrong, but that are easy. And what I like about the idea here is like, there is perhaps a side of looking at destroying the machine as it's not right, we shouldn't be doing this, but that's because it's representative of us being lazy when they could be doing all of the same stuff. They could be, figuring out the toxin in the air on Niflheim and all of that through it might be harder, it might take longer, but through things that are a little more ethically responsible in how they actually do it rather than this process. And so I don't know, that was my response to you as far as like my reasoning as to like buying into the fact that they're destroying it. Like, that's what they were saying is like, we still need to think ethically and responsibly and find better ways, because there's probably a way we can do it without killing these clones off.
So the interesting thing is that my question for that, it's really a philosophical question in like, what could be more ethically responsible than someone consenting to doing this and improving humanity? Let's just say like let's make it huge through this process. Nothing about the process in and of itself seems irresponsible or contrary to, it doesn't feel bad. For example, the idea that you brought up of like pouring waste into rivers, like clearly all of a sudden we have toxins and all these things, but like for Mickey's experience, there wasn't anything bad about his thing in that he did exactly what he signed up for. He became immortal, like as a testing hamster for the human race as we explored. Potentially his consent and this, what we go on, if we don't separate his individuality or identity in the 18 Mickeys that we meet, and we consider his consciousness as complete throughout, this could be the best way for us to do this, because there really isn't anything unethical about that if we think of it that way. So that's the hard part, I guess. As I'm looking
the line
at
of ethics are a little fuzzy in that statement, I think.
Well, completely. But I mean, it's whether you believe that the 17
and
Mickeys are different Mickeys. I don't.
But
they're all the same.
But you're saying as long as he ethically signed up for it, then it's fine. But like, that's the thing. Like, the ethical responsibility is like not allowing people to sign up for something like that, because that's the line, I think, that. You're across the other line and saying it's ethical because he signed up.
But he signed up under duress. Like, he signed up because he was running away from something else. There's nothing ethical about that.
And he didn't know what he was signing up for.
Very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
because again,
all of that
SSBD.
aside, the fact that this is here, the fact that this system is in place saying, hey, we've got the paperwork here, as long as they're signing up for it, it's totally okay. Like, I just think that the fact that that paperwork exists is the ethical problem, not the fact that somebody actually signed it.
Totally.
The fact
get
that
what
it's
you're saying.
90 pages long, right? Like, this is an end user license agreement nobody reads.
But what I would challenge in this, I agree with what you're saying, but what I would challenge with you is that Mickey is the brick. Mickey is not the clones, right? So what he actually signed up to be was a superhero and potentially the great savior of civilization. So the only stakes that Mickey truly has for going through all this suffering is the elimination of the brick. Everything else allows him to experience these things in a way that furthers creation and furthers our development as a species. So my point, yes, these things are ethically flexible, but potentially the point that I'm making about the breaking of the machine is that very, very close-mindedly, they chose to focus on Mickey 17 as the real Mickey and are denying all of the great things that happened to them that allowed them to do the things that they do because they had Mickey's, I don't want to say consent because I agree with your point. They had Mickey's buy-in to this as the way to do it. He was the great savior of this civilization, and them killing the machine could be possibly limiting their chance to grow further and become more.
Because if they think in a lazy way, if they start going, well, now we're cutting ourselves off from that, we have to now think smarter and do it the hard way, but we can still get there.
But it goes back to, on a mission like this, let's say we're thinking completely authentically about survival, when gestation of 9 months is, a questionable thing for reproducing and growing the population, being able to clone, mortally wounded representatives to stabilize the population seems like an ethical thing to do. That seems actually pretty cool.
Potentially, yeah.
I'd sign up for being a brick. That's really what I've come to after this conversation.
It boils down to just ethics of cloning, period. I mean, the whole thing really is just, a Dolly the sheep sort of situation that we're going to be circling here. I don't know if there's really a clean way to figure out the actual what's right and what's wrong in this sort of situation, but it is very it's very tricky. And, they start touching on these things. Like, we're seeing differences in character between 17 and 18. He talks about how
with only 2 weeks of development, by the way, like there's not a nurture argument there. Like,
right, exactly.
He came out this way. Yeah.
And he talks about how Nasha had said version, 3 or something was really cranky or something. Like, there were clearly other differences in some of the other iterations as well. So it just speaks to the fact that there is this sense of individual identities within these characters.
Sure.
And so and I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that we're seeing it in a situation where there happen to be 2 at a time out in the world that makes it suddenly seem a lot more gray. But again, then we spend half the movie with the bugs and
well, that's the that's the central criticism of the film, is that it touches on so many things that are fascinating and could make for a really interesting movie, and doesn't commit to any of the bits. I don't know. And I think that destroying the printer at the end is tying a knot on one of the weaker bits that the movie could have actually explored. That, I think, is the frustrating piece. It's a frustrating piece. We haven't mentioned Stephen Yeun as Timo, apart from joking. What did you think of Stephen's performance here? How useful was the character for you?
Other than motivation for setting him on this expendable journey, I feel like you can take that entire plot line out of the movie and the movie still works. And I feel like the script even knows that, because he's not really written that great. Like, he's fine, but he's also just sort of like talking, because there's not a lot of depth to his character. He sort of has no empathy. He sort of is just a scrounger, but he doesn't lean anywhere too far. He's just sort of a plot development. And so if we're talking about simplifying things, I didn't need really any of that. I didn't know what it was for.
That makes complete sense. And I agree with that when I look at it objectively. We could make the case that his experience going on this journey shows us that Mickey didn't have to do what he did, that he could have lied, or he could have done these other things too. So it potentially the presence of this other character and his life through this is becoming a drug dealer, all this nonsense, is more put in the story to show us the stakes of Mickey's through line.
Okay.
Well, the stakes of Mickey's through line, but also the difference between 17 and 18, right? Because Mickey, the first one, was more of a 17, right? He's kind of a doofus, dum-dum. And
sad sack.
He was being taken advantage of, right? Sad sack, dum-dum. He was being taken advantage of as a non-clone, right? And that's ultimately what happened. Look at this class argument where you have this guy who's just a little bit sharper and was able to manipulate his way into becoming a pilot, and not a great one, while Mickey had no choice and ended up, essentially in stowage.
Their relationship reminded me of Pillboy and Jason from The Good Place.
Yeah.
Who's Pillboy?
It's his buddy back home that leads him down all these crazy ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Didn't he end up being
That's
his dad? Anyway,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're related.
It's very
somehow.
confusing. But that's a really good point. But I think that the relationship between characters like that, I don't know that Steven Yeun really captured the depth of what that relationship could have been. And I found myself a little bit heartbroken for it. I thought that they were giving us that prologue as a way to set up how these buddies, grow together and hell, their relationship falls apart fine, but there was just no substance to the character of Timo in the story. And I think you're right. I could have tossed
even
it.
Later, it's just brought back up again that these people are trying to kill him. It's like that's like the only thing that we keep getting with him is like, now they're going to kill me, you got to help me. It's like we're back in the same story that we had with him before. It was a frustrating character that I wish that they had done more with.
Right. Well, and a frustrating character that it's not like I wanted Requiem for a Dream, but I do feel like there's a little bit of room to explore this whole drug situation. If you're going to put the drug situation in play, you got to tell me a little bit more about it. And again, that's just a lane that they put in here and just did not pave. That metaphor is really paying dividends.
I liked the actress that played Nasha, and I liked the character of Nasha. I don't like being said, and then she decided to run against the government and she just won. Do people like her? Does she have any agency? What is she? I know what she does. She was an enforcer, but all of a sudden she's wearing the robes and is talking and she's in charge of anything. And we're just told that. We're just keep being told things. This is what happened next. And it's because remember when she got in that tube? I forgot to tell you that the first time, but then later I told you she got the tube.
Yeah.
And so therefore we should elect her. I don't know.
That's what reminded me of Poor Things. I mean, that's the thing where it's like, oh, there's just some wild developments that have happened. So now rejoining our broadcast, we're now in France, this kind of thing. So that's what reminded me of that. And so it didn't bother me, but I understand why it would bother me.
I wonder if the book had I don't know, just I'm curious now, was it first person? Is that why this story needed such narration in it? Because I can't help but feel like they could have found a way to tell the story without narrating it from beginning to end, where we could have had those character moments that would have actually given us some more information, like finding more out about Nasha and her the fact that people really liked her so much that, I mean, things that could have really helped the story out.
I agree with that.
I want to read the book now. If it's not the book that I want it to be, I feel like I need to write it. Holy cow.
You can write Mickey 8.
I think you could just eliminate the narration and it might be even a more interesting movie.
What's so fascinating about Naomi's character, Naomi Aki, Nasha's character at the end becoming the robed one, I never felt like she was set up to become the politician, and yet they did have a character that was sort of set up to become the politician, which was Dorothy, the science person who kept rescuing.
Right.
And she kept taking tiny actions that add up to activism. And I felt like that would have been more believable. That she becomes
she and Mickey were the only nice people in the whole place.
100%. And I feel like that's just a whiff. It's a missed opportunity.
Or even the operatives that were on the science team, right? The Asian doctor that was behind the science team, leading the resistance. There were potentially better characters to choose for that development.
And would have supported the metaphor better, right? That science becomes, lauded as leadership versus essentially a member of the military.
Well, maybe that's the point.
Even that's the point.
Even with science making this huge stand, that military or strength is still the leadership as we move forward.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
I don't like it. I don't want to be right.
Yeah,
about
I don't
that,
like it
but
either.
yeah.
Right. Just give me
But
something
see,
at the end of this
that's a
movie.
great point, though, and
Yeah.
I would like to have seen them like do
Talk about
something with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
So
like
many
them to
points.
not have
So many
been surprised.
I
All right.
wish there were no creepers.
Really?
Yeah.
What would
I
they
think
have
so.
done instead?
The creepers took so much time and effort that later, when it's like 6 months later or whatever, and they seem more set up and Nasha is in charge, they're still just outside on this big snow field. Like, I don't get the feeling of like, are they still just living on the ship? Like, it just wasn't that clear. I think there was like a now in development sign behind her or something. There's more to do.
Well, for me, the creepers were just a physical manifestation of fear in general, right? Like, we fear what we don't know about these places that we are going, and so they created that. I don't disagree with you, Tommy. I think potentially you could have done a more artful way of manifesting fear that didn't have to do with these things, but this made it tangible and probably made it a little bit more simple to be able to say, okay, I'm afraid of this thing, I'm going to kill this thing.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, though, when you look at the rest of the lanes left over. I think the movie, it ends up being sort of an Avatar unobtainium kind of a story. And what it could have been is hey, we're leaving the civilization as we know it to create something new. But actually, all we're doing is bringing with us all of the problems that we had, because those things are inescapable. And that's like the cycle of despair that the movie gets to explore is, look, there's drugs and there's sex and there's betrayal and there's rebellion and all the stuff we can't get away from, whether you're a church or a military government, whatever. You can't get away from it. And how do we move forward? That's the central question that I think might have been answered in a movie with no creepers.
I love it.
I'd watch that movie. I'd watch the hell out of it.
I'd watch that movie too.
Yeah, it becomes any of these science fiction movies where we are a defending species on Earth because some invading alien has come to take over our planet because they've destroyed all of their own planets. And so they're coming to take all of our resources. That's exactly the story. But now we're that alien coming in to destroy the planet, basically.
Any love for Jung Jae-il's score? Or, of course, Darius Kanji behind the camera.
I really enjoyed the camera. Again, focusing on the first half of the movie. When we were, and this maybe is a positive towards the narration, so I don't know how much I want to lean into it, but when we were experiencing the world as Mickey was, the camera did a great job of shifting and making us feel sort of isolated. What I'm thinking about in particular is when he's in the ice cave and he's looking around and trying to understand what has happened to him and what is about to happen. And the camera is what leads us that way. So it's this sort of first person perspective that's done in a very interesting way that I really liked. And I'm not usually a first person perspective kind of advocate, but in this movie, I think it worked really well because of how little we knew at that point in the story. And they were very creative and interesting choices. So I'll just say that about the camera.
Pretty late in the film, it's when they're all in their little individual prison boxes, and she tells Mickey, wait, the aliens, they were helping you, they were kicking you out of their cave. The movie treated that like a really big revelation. That was not a revelation.
No.
Like, did the movie think that we were all like, oh, no, we were all like, you idiot, they're helping you. Because he was like, hey, jerks, what, does my meat smell bad? I thought the joke was he's so dumb, he doesn't know that they're helping him. And then it turned out.
And then the joke was over. Should have been over.
Yeah, but then that was like a real, I always get nervous when you're ahead of movies like that.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was just another axe to grind, apparently. Got axes all over.
That's apropos of nothing.
No.
I just want to shout out the production design and costume design, because I will say, while there was a lot that was frustrating, I really enjoyed the look of, Niflheim itself wasn't great, but the ship, the Earth, everything, like I enjoyed like the queue that they had in that building that spiraled down when they were waiting in line, like some great moments like that. I loved the printer, like how it would put them out and then kind of like chunk, like
that
suck them
really
back in a little
cool.
bit. It was like old school printing. Like I loved so many of those little elements and touches that really were kind of throughout it. So, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of really interesting things that made this world feel real to me. I bought into the space, even if it was one that I found frustrating.
It seems a little unfair because we didn't actually like them to completely dismiss the creatures. So I do want to say, if we take the creatures out of this movie but put them in another movie, there are some cool things about the creature design. Like I actually thought the creatures were cool creatures, and I really enjoyed the way their behavior was portrayed. That sort of we grow from puppy to woolly mammoth kind of energy, and their defensive mechanism of swirling on top of the big one. I thought that was just generally very cool. So insofar as I don't think they should have even been in the movie, since they looked good.
Sure.
I loved the creatures, like everything about them, the way that their tongue would like they'd ululate when they were howling and everything. Like there was some pretty fantastic designs with the creatures in the film, even if they, like you said, shouldn't have been in it.
Right.
All right. Let us then turn our attention to this message from our sponsor. Are you tired of being an expendable podcast listener? Does your streaming service treat you like just another clone, sent out to consume content only to be forgotten and replaced? Well, guess what? The Next Reel family of film podcasts has a better solution than endless regeneration: membership. Unlike other corporate overlords, we actually want you to retain all your memories. Imagine accessing bonus episodes without having to die horrifically first. Picture getting early access to episodes. Your time actually matters to us. Warning: side effects of membership may include experiencing in-episode bonus content and the joy of your very own personal podcast feed customized just for you and not your expendable alternate. Oh no, your corporate listening device just printed out another ad. If only you had ad-free versions of select episodes. If only you could access live stream recording sessions to watch our hosts discuss films in real time without being sent on deadly space missions. You don't have to secretly collaborate with any of your other selves. You can openly join exclusive channels in our Discord community without fear of termination. Plus, you'll experience the satisfaction of directly supporting the podcasts you love. A feeling so powerful, it could overthrow an entire corrupt regime. Join today at truestory.fm/join and become part of the Next Reel collective consciousness. Get member editions of The Next Reel, Movies We Like, CinemaScope, and Sitting in the Dark, too. Remember, in the world of podcasts, you're not expendable. You're essential. And your listening experience shouldn't have to die repeatedly to get better. Join today at truestory.fm/join. Okay, it's time. We need to apportion our stars and hearts. And I'm very excited to see this. Letterboxd.com/thenextreel. That's where we put our reviews and share our love of movies. Where are you going to take your stars and put them for this movie? JJ, as possibly the most enthusiastic of us, why don't you kick us off?
Well, I did start coming to the show today with a 4.5 stars because of everything that I talked about from the first half of this movie. And I think I realized really in talking to you guys that a lot of that is about potential, and that much of the weirdness that ensued after into the second half of the film is it requires some analysis as well. So I went back down to 4 stars. I still think conceptually, and I keep bringing it back to Poor Things, I love Snowpiercer. I love the things that Bong Joon Ho is doing. I love the Yorgos Lanthimos. The fact that this hearkened to that, to me, it's in that category of movies that I really like. So I want to still give it 4 stars, and I do give it a heart as well because I enjoyed so much of the creativity and the approach.
Awesome. Thomas?
Me? Yeah, I think probably if I were to quantify it, and I didn't realize it at the time until this conversation, but I think I really loved half of this movie.
Yeah.
Overall. And so I'm going to give it right down the middle, 3 stars, but a heart, because I'm really glad that it exists. I like swings like this. I'll always be more interested in new stuff versus IP. And so I am really happy for it. I'm glad that Robert Pattinson continues to make such interesting choices of which directors to work with. And so, yeah, I'll give it right down the middle, 3, but a heart. So it's like 3+.
All right, Andy, there's a lot of goodwill in the room. What are you going to do?
Well, unlike Tommy, I'm literally going to go right down the middle and do 2.5.
Do I not know what numbers were? Oh, that sucks.
That's funny.
I'm going to keep it as a 3, but I'm giving myself 2.5.
There you go.
Everything Tommy said is where I am. Like, it was so frustrating of a watch. It was too long. But I loved the ideas that they were playing with. I just wish that they actually landed with any of them, and I just don't feel like they did. As it was a very frustrating watch for me. Like Okja, and for me, Snowpiercer, I think probably works the best of the Bong Joon Ho, the English language films that he's done. I don't think, even with Tilda Swinton's character, I don't think it ever felt as silly as this one did. So I struggled with a lot, but I do still, I enjoy watching Bong Joon Ho and what he's doing. And so I'll still give it a heart. So 2.5, but with a heart.
That is more enthusiasm than I expected. I'm really pleased to hear that, Andy. I am right in there with Tommy. I am 3 stars and a heart. I love. Yeah, right in the middle. Right smack in the middle. And 3 stars and a heart. I feel like there are too many allusions to so much of my other favorite kind of satire, and this fits too well in the Terry Gilliam, in the Luc Besson, in the Armando Iannucci for me not to at least give it the credit that it's due for. Again, that swing. I think it's taking a big swing, and I think it's fun. So that's it. We made a podcast about a movie that we marginally liked and are glad that it exists. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. What are we going to do next month? We just decided it, and I've already forgotten. So someone else has to tell us.
Sinners.
Oh, right. Sinners.
You like blues music? You like old-timey cabins? You like vampires? It's like From Dusk Till Dawn, but
you already know the twist.
I like Ryan Coogler. Does that count?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, right now
actually,
the trailer seems like Black Snake Moan with vampires.
I love
It's the latest trailer, so I'm excited for it.
Me too. Very excited for it. So that'll be our April film, and we're excited to do that. Thank you, Andy, for coming back after.
Yeah.
For this latest
thank you so much.
M film.
That was fun. Yeah. I'm looking
so
forward
glad
to the next M titled movie that I can talk about with you.
And of course, JJ, Tommy, as always, great to podcast with you boys.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, dear listener, for your time and attention. Whether you agreed, disagreed, or just came here to shout at your phones, we appreciate you. If you had fun, don't forget to join the conversation on our Discord at truestory.fm/Discord. And, as you heard from that old-timey mystery guy, if you really love what we do, become a supporting member at truestory.fm/join for all those exclusive perks. Whatever you do now, watch more movies. Don't let them get you angry. And remember, just because it has a post-credit scene doesn't mean it's any good. Meeting adjourned.